Hi, this is Vanessa Love, and this is my channel about the mental health field and related topics. Alright, so I think I'm gonna upset some people, but I hope people will hear me out about what I'm trying to say. Also, sorry about the hair. It's been humid lately. This is what I get. Anyway, okay, so wanted to talk about Brene Brown and the gift of imperfection. So I guess the story begins way before I started reading about the gift of imperfection, or just started reading about the gift of imperfection. A couple of years before, maybe 2011, 2012, I read a book by Thomas More, Dark Night of the Soul. I listened to it, I think either on books on CD or some audiobook that I was able to find. And really just, it was so good. It wasn't like he said anything that was like particularly mind-blowing, but it just is exactly what I needed to hear at that time. And it was basically, I was adjusting to work life after grad school, and I was experiencing a lot of depression because of, that adjustment. And listening to the book, I should say, I don't even think he read it, but like listening to the book was very helpful in helping me to accept my depression as something that could be a positive and something that could mean something, rather than me just being angry about having depression. And, once I kind of got to a point where I can accept that there were days where I just wanted to sleep more, that it just, like, I could accept that was something that my body was telling me to do, and it changed a lot of things for me. And it changed the way I interacted with depression and the way that I felt about that depression. And so, when I hear people like talk about the gift of imperfection, I'm like, okay, so maybe that was my experience, but it was a different book. I did not like reading The Gift of Imperfection. I started reading it as a book club, at a book club, and it was one of the first books, and it just seemed like if Brene Brown wasn't using examples of herself, just the examples that she was using just kind of upset me. They were like, oh, and I have a husband, and I have a house, and I have a job, and I have kids, and, sometimes it's just really hard. And, like, it doesn't sound like her husband was, like, abusive or anything, or that her job environment was bad. It sounds like she kind of, just had a lot of shame just from whatever other things that maybe happened in her life, or, she was just experiencing a lot of shame. And, maybe the I guess, goal of the book was like, yeah, even people who have their life together may seem like they may still experience anxiety and shame spirals and these type of things, and it can be very difficult. Okay, sure. But I just could not relate to it. And I just found it more and more upsetting the longer I went through this book to want to read this book. I think I got halfway through it and was just like, I can't. I gave the book away. I was done. I stepped away from the book club. And it was an in-person book club at that point because it's 2014. And so, yeah, like, I didn't find it to be this miracle. I already felt like if I wasn't working, like, I had already kind of accepted some things about myself. Obviously, by that point, I had evolved past the message of the book, and there were probably other things that had kind of contributed to me feeling stronger about myself and feeling less shame about myself and more acceptance towards myself than, this book could really offer at that time. And one of my colleagues was like, well, maybe, go back and read the book. And I was like, I mean, if I have evolved past it, like, many years ago, I'm not going to want to waste my time. And honestly, don't waste your time on bad books. So I looked up Brene Brown's CV. Now, CVs are supposed to be about 2 pages. Hers is 11, and not updated. I guess like, hopefully she's updating it. But also, that's a little long. If I can, the way that I would shorten a CV like hers would be to have the education and everything, research that she's done, because I think she's only done like a couple of actual like research things, and go towards like, these are topics that I talk about in my speeches, or presentations, like that, and you don't have to list every place that you've done a speech, because I mean, then your CV turns out to be 11 pages. So it's not great to have a CV that long. I also think that that's kind of an academic thing. I do want to clarify that she is a research psychologist, so she can do research that's about, sending out surveys for shame or whatever, maybe doing a therapeutic interaction that where someone talks about shame, and then maybe some of the things that she talks about in her book, like strategies, they learn about those strategies, and then you take a survey after the what is that, the AB type of research. There's a lot of different research you can do, definitely, and so I do want to kind of clarify, she's a research psychologist. She is not an actual therapist. She does not sit down with people one-on-one and talk the way that I do, and some other people do. The other thing that I noticed particularly was that she just kind of stayed in the Houston area for school. So it was like, yeah, undergrad, and grad school and post-grad school, Houston area. And so it's kind of like, okay, all right. A little bit rare that someone out, like, when after they've had their PhD, starts giving speeches. But yeah, within a year of her graduating, she was giving speeches. It's unheard of, because, like, with my fields, at this point in Connecticut, I think after a year you can get your license, but when I started, you had to wait like minimum 2 years working post-grad in order to get your license. So like, you get more experience, I guess. So for me, it just seems a little odd that like a year after, she's like, all right, cool, let's talk about shame, because I did my whole dissertation on it, type of thing. So there's kind of that, and it seems like she kind of skyrocketed after that, and it's fine. I'm like, yeah, more power to her. It's like, she is very impressive, but also like, there's just something I just could not connect with her writing. I just kind of get the sense that she's trying to be too relatable, and it's not very helpful. Yeah. Let's see. The other thing that I kind of noticed was, I went to a scholar search on Google. There's this like kind of separate, like, if you want to look up research about self-esteem and women or depression in men, you can go to Scholar on Google and like look up like scholarly like articles. Now most articles are just like, if I was going to write an article, it actually wouldn't say, like, you could look up my name, right? But it actually wouldn't say my name. It would probably be like, Love, V, dot, and, associates, blah, blah, blah. Here's like kind of the little thing about it, 120 research, participants, blah, 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 blah. Conclusions. Basically your abstract. So instead of having something like that, where it was just like, oh, okay, here are the writers for this, I think even sometimes they do like v.love, like they don't really like emphasize any names in particular. Like this, I'm gonna call this tacky. Whenever I looked up her name, it said that she was the New York bestseller, New York Times bestseller. And it's kind of like, okay, great. What was the actual research about? Like, it wasn't obviously about your New York, like, bestseller, like, New York Times bestseller. Like, obviously, like, this is about something. And it just, that's why I think it's a little tacky. It just seems like a lot of things that she's kind of doing. I'm like, I kind of think that's a little tacky. That's not how most people like actually go about this. I do have colleagues who write books, and they'll be like, oh yeah, like I'm full fee. Like one of my colleagues in town, she's like, oh yeah, I'm full fee, but I do have a book. Here's the book. And I think hers is about like psychology and Eastern medicine or something like that. It's like really cool, and I think she does like yoga therapy as well. So, again, like one of those like really cool people that's like, oh yeah, cool, awesome. Not a New York Times bestseller, but like still like that's amazing to me. If you know anything from book YouTube, you know that there are ways to manipulate the New York Times bestsellers. I don't think that's the case for Brene Brown, but I do kind of want to bring that up, that they only really care about the numbers. So as long as you're selling 10,000 books about or more per week, that's how you get on the New York Times bestsellers. You obviously can manipulate that in some way, especially if you're kind of a figurehead, if you're, if your book is well acclaimed, all of that stuff will definitely influence how many people are buying your books. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a great book, because it's just based on numbers. So there is that type of stuff to consider when someone says that they're a New York Times bestseller. Also, if they're a Amazon #1 bestseller, like it's probably like in a particular like subsection, and it's like, oh, in historical fiction in the United States or something like that. It's like, oh, okay, so you're #1 in that particular like specific category. Again, I don't think that this is entirely what's happening in this case, but it is one of those things to consider, because it just means that it's the popularity contest. Oh, so you're popular, and maybe because you're popular, your book is a #1 seller. Cool, great. It doesn't represent what's actually happening. You don't have to have a good book in order to be on the New York Times bestsellers. So yeah, that's just kind of one of those like side notes to consider. So yeah, I just didn't find her that interesting. I didn't find the book very relatable. It all kind of seemed like a humble brag. And, I get it, like, oh, even someone who has like a nice, like, cushy job and, it's kind of a nice life, like, can still have depression. Like, okay. Is that the message that you want to send out? Or like, is the message really like, accept yourself? Sometimes you're going to go through these things. It's okay. You'll get through them. I know from experience, those type of things. And yeah, I just don't find it very relatable. I warn my clients about it, because like a lot of therapists do push her books, especially if someone's kind of going through similar things. And I love books, but I don't try to push them on my clients. I think that if they're interested in some things, that we can find a way for both of us to like work through a book. I'd much rather do that than to have someone just do a book recommendation. And I think some therapists probably they probably wouldn't find any issue with just being like, well, here, have this book, you can keep it, whatever. And that's kind of, it's not really my style. Again, if someone wants to work through a book together, I don't mind. That's great, wonderful, but not really just handing out books. Because yeah, that's not fun. That's not what this is about. Yeah, so anyway, I hope that was helpful for you, and I hope to talk with you soon. All right, have a good one.